Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Contractor Truth Podcast. I am your host, as normal, John, the Contractor Growth Guy, and as always, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your busy day to spend them with me, whether you're driving between job sites or sitting in your truck eating lunch, working in the shop, or pretending to listen while you're avoiding paperwork. I am glad you're here no matter what you're doing. And if you've been following me on social media or listening to the podcast regularly, thank you. I say that all the time, and I mean it every time that I say it. I genuinely appreciate every follow, every comment, every message, and every review. It's amazing how this little community continues to grow, and I'm really, really grateful that you're a part of it. Now, if this is your first time listening, welcome. And you should probably know right now what my regular listeners already know right from the start, that this is not some fancy $1 million podcast studio. I am not Joe Rogan. You will find that out. You probably know that by now. There's no production crew, no sound engineers, no makeup artist, no expensive set. Just me with a microphone, and I was going to say a cup of coffee, but I'm done my coffee for the morning. Glass of water to keep me lubricated. Whatever room I can find that's quiet enough, I don't hear kids and dogs and so on. Anyway, bottom line is we're keeping things pretty low budget around here so that all of us can afford it, which is probably why contractors relate to it so well. We're more interested in delivering value here than winning awards for my production quality. So let's get to today's topic. If you're a contractor, you've probably noticed something, and this is going to be the understatement of the day, that everything is costing more. Materials, labor, insurance, fuel, equipment. Customers are taking longer to make decisions. They're asking for more estimates, watching every dollar that they spend. And that's just simply the reality of doing business today. Now, before we go any further, this episode is not about politics. We don't do politics here. It's not about tariffs. It's not about pointing fingers at government and blaming anyone, because honestly, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day why costs are going up. What matters is what you do about it. So today I want to answer a much more important question. How do great contractors continue to grow when everyone else is saying, oh, business is tough, And it is. I get it. I've lived it. I understand it. Here's something I've learned after more than 30 years in business. Listen, every contractor is facing the same market in your area. But why is it that not every contractor is getting the same results? Some are shrinking. Some are surviving. Some are quietly having their best years ever. I know it's strange to say. Well, what is the difference? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So grab a coffee, whatever you need to keep you lubricated. Turn the volume up. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into today's episode, I have to talk about something that I experienced on the weekend, because it really left an impression on me. My family and I spent Saturday at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and I'm fortunate to live just over an hour away from Detroit, so it's an easy trip for us. It's a nice day trip, actually. We were home actually before supper, and if you've never been there and you live within a few hours of it, I highly recommend you go. Now, it wasn't cheap. Speaking of things going up, I couldn't believe how much it cost, but I'll tell you, it was worth every penny we spent. Now, I don't know what I expected to see. I think I've been before as a kid years ago. But, I mean, I knew I would see old cars, old farm machinery, a lot of Henry Ford history. But I came away, I guess because I'm in this space, I came away thinking about something much, much bigger. I was so impressed the whole time I was there. It didn't matter what segment I was in, okay? I came away overwhelmed with American inventiveness, American innovation, American entrepreneurship, and really the incredible opportunity that exists when people are given the freedom to create something. Now, I want you to juxtapose this with the fact that on Sunday evening, I sat down to watch a movie because I love biopics and I love movies, especially if they're biopics about a business. I watched the movie Tetris on Apple TV. I was not a fan of the language. Unfortunately, I have to tell some of you that because I run a kid-friendly show. It is not a kid-friendly movie. I don't know why they had to do that. They didn't have to, but that's the way Hollywood works. But the story itself, talking about the difference between the communist and capitalist systems and the freedom that the capitalist system allows us in North America, in Britain, in Australia, New Zealand, where most of my audience is all throughout Europe today. And I'm saying this as a Canadian, by the way. Putting that next to what I saw at the Henry Ford Museum and seeing the restrictiveness and the lack of incentive in a system of doing things that puts the state at the top, there's no advantage, there's no incentive for anybody to produce anything, to invent anything, because they get nothing out of it at the end. So I have to go through this with you. I have to share this with you because this is at the root of all that we do, okay? I'm a Canadian, so if you accuse me of waving the stars and stripes too aggressively here, then so be it, okay? But I think sometimes maybe to my American audience it'd be good for you to hear someone from outside your country remind you of what you have. We have it here in Canada too, to a large degree. Europe has it, Australia, New Zealand have it, and we need to appreciate it more than we do perhaps. Walking around that museum, I was genuinely struck by how many ideas that completely changed the world that came out of the United States of America, okay? There were three in particular that really, really stood out to me. The first one was the Wright brothers, because when you come into the museum, there is a replica of the Wright brothers flyer hanging above you in the lobby. Okay, so that jumps out at you right away. Where would our world be without the miracle of human flight? Okay, I'm going to be doing some real content on this, so if you follow me on social media, you're going to get to see some of this and get my reflections on it. The other one was Thomas Edison, and I realized, by the way, I want to give credit where credit is due. There is a European component to what Edison did, so he doesn't get all the credit. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but a lot of what he did, he had European counterparts that he was working with, okay? So, but again, it doesn't take away from the point of incentive to invent. And then, of course, Henry Ford. I mean, how can you miss Henry Ford? That's literally the name of the museum. Now, just think about those three for a minute. The Wright brothers looked at the sky and they believed that human beings could fly. Now, today that sounds ridiculous because we take air travel like it's like riding a bus or a bike. Okay? We complain if our flight is delayed for 45 minutes. We complain about legroom. We complain about the poor food, okay? But a century ago, two guys were standing around in a bicycle shop in Ohio trying to figure out whether they could get a machine off the ground and keep it in the air. Now, think about the audacity of that idea at the time. I mean, I don't have any doubt. Everybody that knew about it thought those guys are nuts. That's crazy. And yet they kept going. They kept experimenting. They kept learning. They kept failing a lot, I'm sure. They kept making adjustments. What we know about is the success. We don't know about all the failures and all the roadblocks and the obstacles that they had to overcome. But eventually something that humanity had dreamed about for centuries became a reality, powered flight. And it changed everything. It changed our world completely. Travel, commerce, even war, which obviously I'm not a fan of, tourism, transportation, made the world smaller, the ability to move people and products around the world. Whole industries eventually grew out of an idea that probably sounded absolutely impossible when they first suggested it. Okay? Now, look at Edison. Think about the world these people were living in. Okay? You walk into a room today and flip a switch. You don't even think about it. Okay? Even the electricians in my audience, okay, you probably take for granted because you're so used to it. We plug things into walls. We charge our phones. We turn on equipment. We run factories. We light entire cities. It's just normal, but that wasn't always normal. Someone had to imagine a different world first. Somebody had to believe that there was a better way. And Edison is such an interesting example because his story wasn't simply about having one brilliant idea. It was about constant experimentation, trying things, getting things wrong, improving them, trying again. Actually, it was Edison, I think, that said that he didn't look at his failures. You know, he said, if I failed 10,000 times, they weren't 10,000 failures. I found out 10,000 ways that wouldn't work. That's quite a perspective when you think about it, okay? Innovation isn't usually one brilliant moment. It's somebody refusing, despite the obstacles, to stop working on a problem. I mean, his Menlo Park lab burned to the ground. He had that obstacle to overcome among many others, right? And then, of course, you have Henry Ford. Most of you know he didn't invent the automobile, okay? But he had a lot to do with the propagation of the automobile. He looked at something that already existed, asked a different question. How do we make it better, faster, more affordable? That's the big one. Because if we're going to make it more affordable, we need to manufacture it differently. Okay, how do we take something that was available primarily to wealthy people and make it accessible to ordinary families? That is raw entrepreneurship. Okay, entrepreneurship doesn't always mean inventing something that's never existed before. Sometimes entrepreneurship means looking at an existing product, an existing service, or an existing industry and saying, hey, there has to be a better way to do this. All right? I mean, that's what Henry Ford did. That's what Ray Kroc did with McDonald's. There's a big McDonald's sign there. It reminded me of the movie The Founder, which if you have not seen The Founder with Michael Keaton, it's an amazing story of what Ray Kroc did with McDonald's. He was certainly not a man of great integrity, I would say. I don't have the highest respect for Ray Kroc, but there are great lessons to learn from the story. I mean, people had served food in restaurants before. He found a way to do it differently. All these ideas helped transform the industry. Okay, with Ford, he transformed manufacturing. He transformed transportation. It transformed the way cities were built, where people could live. It changed employment. It changed commerce. It changed the entire culture. And as I'm walking through this museum looking at all this, I couldn't help but think what an incredible thing human creativity is. And what an incredible thing happens when creativity is combined with freedom and opportunity. Now, I know we stay away from politics. I'm not trying to turn this into one, but I'm going to give you my opinion anyway because you're listening to my podcast. I think one of the greatest strengths of a capitalist system is that it creates an environment where people are rewarded for solving problems, okay? You see a need, you create a solution. If your solution creates enough value for enough people, you have the opportunity to build a business around it. And there's something incredibly powerful about that. Nobody guaranteed Henry Ford that people would buy his cars. Nobody guaranteed Edison that his ideas would eventually work. Nobody guaranteed the Wright brothers that their airplane would ever get off the ground. They took risks. They invested time. They invested money. They failed. They learned. They tried again. And the marketplace ultimately decided whether they had created that value. That's one of the beautiful things about entrepreneurship. You don't have to come from the right family. You don't necessarily need somebody to appoint you to the position. You don't need permission from everybody around you to have an idea. You look at a problem and say, I think I can solve that. And then you go and try. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean everybody succeeds. That's part of the deal, too. There's no guarantees. Businesses fail. Ideas fail. Products fail. And, by the way, the museum is full of that, too. Some very interesting things about that. Products that failed. People lose money. People make mistakes. That's the risk. The other side of risk is opportunity. Sometimes I think we spend so much time focusing on what's wrong that we forget what an unbelievable blessing that opportunity actually is. We complain about taxes, we complain about the government, we complain about regulations, competitors, material prices, labor, interest rates. Believe me, anybody that knows me personally knows I've done plenty of complaining myself. But walking through that museum on Saturday reminded me of something. We live in a part of the world where an ordinary person can still decide, I am going to start a business. Now, think about how extraordinary that really is. You can buy a truck, buy some tools, learn a trade, build a reputation, serve a few customers, hire somebody, then hire somebody else, build systems, buy another truck, open a shop, and eventually create a company that provides income not only for your family, but maybe for dozens of other families as well. That's incredible. And I think this is good to step back because contractors sometimes forget that. You didn't just create yourself a job. You did that. But you have the opportunity to build something that didn't exist before you created it, something that serves people, that creates employment, that creates economic activity, something that can eventually outlive you. Okay? That's a pretty incredible privilege. And I think we should occasionally stop and appreciate. That's what we're doing right now. Prosperity doesn't just magically appear. Someone has to create it. Someone has to design and build the house, to manufacture the product, to install the roof, to wire the building, to pour the concrete, take the risk, hire the employee, find the customer, solve the problem. When enough people are doing that, you create an economy. And that's what really struck me walking through the museum. You could almost walk through American history by looking at the problems that people decided to solve. Transportation was difficult, so people built better transportation. Communication was difficult. Enter Alexander Graham Bell. People built better communication. Manufacturing was slow. People created better manufacturing systems. Agriculture was difficult. It still is hard work, okay? But people designed better equipment. People wanted to move farther and faster. Someone built automobiles. Someone built airplanes. Every time someone solved one problem, it created the opportunity to solve another. And that's how progress happens. Now, our improvement builds on another improvement, or one improvement rather builds on another improvement. One invention creates an entirely new industry, and that industry creates 10 other industries around it. Think about the automobile. Okay, Ford wasn't just building cars. Think about everything automobiles eventually created around them. Road construction, gas stations, repair shops, parts manufacturing, insurance, dealerships, hotels, restaurants, tourism, trucking, entire suburbs. An invention doesn't just create a product. Sometimes it changes everything around it. The same thing happened with flight. Same thing happened with electricity. And I think sometimes we look back at people like Edison and Ford and the Wright brothers as if they belonged to some completely different species. Like they were these mythical geniuses who had something the rest of us don't have. But there's another way to look at it. They were problem solvers. They were curious, and they stayed curious. They experimented. They were willing to look stupid. They were willing to fail. They were willing to keep working when the answer wasn't obvious. And that's something every business owner can learn from, because innovation didn't stop with those guys. We sometimes talk about invention like all the good ideas happened, in the 50-year period between 1880 and 1930. But that's not true. It's continuing to happen right now. Robotics, artificial intelligence, medical technology, software, construction materials, manufacturing, energy, automation, communication. Okay, somewhere right now, there's probably somebody working in a shop, a garage, a laboratory, an office, or even sitting at a kitchen table working on something that 10 years from now we'll all wonder how we lived without it. That is exciting to me, okay? And contractors need to remember that innovation isn't limited to inventing airplanes and light bulbs either. You can innovate inside your business. Maybe you figure out a better estimating process. That's innovation. Maybe you create a better customer experience. That's innovation. Maybe you find a way to complete jobs faster without sacrificing quality. That's innovation. Maybe you build a better scheduling system, or maybe you communicate with customers better than anyone else in your market. Maybe you figure out how to generate leads differently. Maybe You use technology to eliminate hours of wasted work and administrative work. Okay, maybe you create a training system that helps employees become productive faster. That's innovation, okay? You're solving problems, and that's really what business is. Find a problem, solve it, create value, get paid for the value that you create. Then find the next problem. And I think that's one of the messages contractors desperately need right now, because there are plenty of problems. Material prices are up. We're going to get into that in a minute. Labor costs are up. Insurance is up. Fuel is up. Equipment costs more. Customers are being more cautious. People are getting more estimates. Sales cycles are taking longer. Competition's getting tougher. There's the temptation of that when all of that happens, to sit around and complain about it. But imagine if the Wright brothers had spent all their time complaining about gravity. Gravity was definitely working against them. Imagine Edison saying, well, apparently creating electrical lighting is difficult, so I guess we'll just keep using what we've always used. Or imagine Henry Ford looking at the cost and complexity of automobile manufacturing and saying, well, I guess that's just the way the industry works. That's not how progress happens. Progress happens when somebody looks at a difficult situation and asks, what can I do differently? What can I improve? What can I control? Where's the opportunity? And that brings me directly into what I want to talk about today, because we are operating in a challenging business environment, okay? It's real. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I am not a rose-colored glasses guy. Costs are higher. Customers are more cautious. The world over, it's true. Competition is intense. Margins are definitely under pressure. But these conditions don't affect every contractor the same way. Okay? Some contractors are shrinking. Some are surviving. And some, and I talk to this segment often, they're growing. They're all operating in the same economy. They're paying roughly the same prices for fuel. They're dealing with the same interest rates. They're buying from many of the same suppliers. They're selling to many of the same customers. So what is the difference? What's the secret? The difference is how they respond. Okay, and that may be the biggest thing that my visit to the Henry Ford Museum reminded me of. The difficult problems have always existed. Okay, the people we remember are usually the people who decided to solve them. Okay, come hell or high water, they're going to solve them. So maybe instead of asking, why is business so difficult right now, we need to start looking at it differently. What opportunity is hiding inside this difficulty? Because downturns don't eliminate opportunity, they redistribute it. And the customers the contractors who keep learning and improving and marketing, communicating, innovating, and serving their customers while everyone else retreats are often the ones who come out of difficult markets a lot stronger than they went into them. So with that in mind, let's talk about the reality of this. Look, if you've been in the contracting business for any length of time, you've probably noticed something. The work hasn't necessarily disappeared, but the business has changed. Everything seems to cost more than it did just a few years ago. Materials are more expensive, labor is more expensive, insurance premiums continue to climb, fuel costs are more, equipment costs are more, even the cost of borrowing money has changed the way people make purchasing decisions. And it's not just contractors who are feeling it, okay? This is what makes it tough. Homeowners are feeling it too. In fact, according to the National Association of Home Builders, builder confidence has remained below 40 for 15 consecutive months, okay? That's the longest stretch since 2012. Builders continue to point to rising material costs, elevated mortgage rates, skilled labor shortages, and affordability challenge as the biggest pressures on the industry. Now, think about what that means. That's not just one slow month or one bad quarter. This has been an extended period where builders across America, apologies to my European, Australian, and Canadian audience for this, okay, but I think this is representative of the world over. This has been an extended period where builders across America have been operating in a much tougher environment than they're used to, okay? Now, let's look at the customer. People haven't stopped spending money. But they have become a lot more careful about how and where they spend it. Okay, higher mortgage rates, higher borrowing costs mean homeowners are taking longer to make decisions. Okay, many are delaying projects altogether, while others are requesting multiple estimates before moving forward. I think we're feeling that pressure. Again, that National Association of Home Builder reports that affordability remains the number one issue affecting buyer demand, with many prospective buyers simply waiting on the sidelines. That means the average sales cycle is also getting much longer. The days of meeting a homeowner on Tuesday, getting a signed contract on Wednesday, not as common as it used to be, perhaps. Okay, now I'd love your feedback on this, what you're experiencing in your market, but it seems to me customers want to think about it longer. They want to compare more. They want more estimates more often. They want reassurance that they're making the right decision. And can you blame them? Really? I mean, wouldn't you do the same thing? When everything costs more, people naturally become more cautious. And at the same time, contractors are competing harder for every opportunity. Again, the NAHB reports that 30% of builders are now cutting prices to attract buyers, with the average discount sitting around 6%. Okay, so even more telling is that 63% of home builders are offering sales incentives to help close deals. Now that tells us something important. Competition has intensified. Okay, those are facts. That's hard to argue with. Now, I know it's going to vary from one market to the next. You can talk about blue states and red states and all that kind of political stuff that we don't want to get into, but that is countrywide, okay? When work becomes harder to win, many contractors respond by lowering their prices. And I've watched this happen for more than 30 years. Someone gets nervous, instead of improving their business, they simply become cheaper. But the problem with that is it's a desperation strategy. It's not a winning strategy. And here's the important thing I want you to hear. We're not making excuses. This is simply today's business environment. Every contractor listening to this podcast is dealing with some version of this. Whether it's rising costs or more cautious customers, longer sales cycles, tighter margins, more competition, the question isn't whether these challenges exist. They do. The question is, how are you going to respond? Okay? Because here's what I've learned after more than 30 years in business. The market isn't the biggest threat to your business. Your response to the market is. Okay. All right. So we're going to move into the second segment here. We're going to talk about mistakes that contractors make. You see, every challenging market reveals something. It reveals how business owners think. Okay? When business is booming, almost everyone feels confident. The phone is ringing, schedule is full, the crews are busy, and it's easy to believe you're a great business owner when there's more work than you can handle. But when the market tightens, it shrinks. That's when your mindset is tested, okay? And unfortunately, that's when many contractors start making emotional decisions. I've watched it happen over and over again during the last 30 years. Business slows down just a little. The panic begins to set in. The first thing many contractors do, because it's the knee-jerk response, they lower their prices. They think, if I can just be the cheapest, I'll win more jobs. But here's the problem. In this market, your costs are going up and your prices are going down. You're squeezing your profit from both directions. That's not a long-term strategy. That's survival mode. And the next thing they do is stop marketing. Cancel their SEO contract. Stop running ads online. Quit posting on social media. Stop asking for reviews. Stop networking. Stop building relationships. Look at marketing as an expense instead of an investment. Now think about that for a minute. If there are fewer opportunities available, wouldn't that be the worst possible time to become less visible? It's like turning your headlights off because it's getting dark. It makes no sense. Then comes another costly mistake. They stop investing in themselves. No more training, no more coaching, no more books, no more Audible where I, train while I'm on the road, no more conferences that I go to. I'll start learning again when business picks up, but that's backwards, okay? When business is easy, almost anyone can succeed. I remember when the real estate market was hot during COVID, um, I said that like a trained monkey, and I mean an untrained monkey, could sell houses back in that market. I mean, you put a sign up, boom, you had 13 competing offers and sold. It didn't take great skill, unfortunately, to do that. But I tell you, now that the market's turned up, markets turn downward, we're starting to see who the skillful realtors really, really are. Same thing is true in contracting, okay? When business is difficult, that's exactly when having better skills give you a competitive advantage. This is when you should be sharpening your saw. Don't put it away, okay? Something else happens. The focus changes. Instead of asking, how do I grow? The question becomes, how do I survive? Now, don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with being cautious. Cash flow matters. Expenses matter. But you should absolutely make wise financial decisions. Surviving should never become your identity, because a business that focuses on survival rarely builds any serious momentum. You're just treading water, and then someone else is going to pass you. And finally, there's the easiest trap of all, blaming the economy. And we all do this, okay? Well, let me be clear. The economy does affect your business. This podcast is called Contractor Truth, so I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not denying that. But here's the question I always ask. If the economy is the only reason your business isn't growing, how do you explain some contractors who are growing anyway? Because they're out there. Every single market downturn has them, okay? I have seen this over and over and over again. You say, John, it's not true. Well, you're going to have to deny the 30 years of very observational experience that I've had to get there. Okay, I can see it right now. I can see it in my local market. Okay, things are down. People are finding it tough. There's been a population shrinking here. Certainly, cost pressures exist, and yet I can think of an HVAC contractor that is absolutely exploding in growth. Okay, I know many businesses across the country, across the world, who are growing. I mean, I will tell you that most of the calls I get, most of the contacts I get are from people trying to manage the growth of their company, okay? I do get a significant portion that are struggling with not enough leads or not closing enough sales. I do get that. But I would say at least half of my calls are about, hey, I'm growing really quickly. What do I do? How do I grow? How do I manage this growth? How do I tailor this? How do I deal with the cash flow issues, and should I borrow money to buy more equipment? All those issues that come with growing pains, okay? Because those contractors are out there. Every city has them. Every market has them. Every trade has them. While some contractors are shrinking, others are expanding. While some are complaining, others are hiring. While some are cutting prices, others are raising them. What's the difference? It's not the market. It's not the economy. It's the response. And I've learned something over the years that has saved me from making a lot of bad decisions. Emotional decisions are almost always wrong and expensive. Fear makes us reactive. It's natural. Believe me, I'm as emotional as the next girl, okay? Confidence makes us intentional. Contractors who thrive during difficult times aren't the ones who pretend everything is fine, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about it's not rose-colored glasses. They acknowledge reality, they stay calm, they stick to their principles, and they keep doing the things that build a great business, because the goal isn't just to survive a tough market. The goal is to come out of it stronger than when you went in. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next, okay? Now, I want to talk about in this segment that downturns create opportunity. Okay, now, because after everything I've just said, you might be thinking, John, you're making it sound pretty tough out there. And in many ways it is. And some of you are going, yeah, I know, I'm feeling it right now. But I want to completely change your perspective. Because I've lived through recessions. I've seen housing slowdowns. I was severely affected by the financial crisis of 2008. I was very much affected, as we all were, by COVID lockdowns, the supply chain disruptions that came with that, the inflation that came as a result of government spending, and that's what it comes from, by the way. Again, that's not political, that's just a fact. When governments print money with no increase in GDP, inflation is the result, okay? I've been through periods when interest rates were low, like during COVID, and then seeing the sudden rise of them after COVID. Good economies, bad economies. Now, I've learned something that has become one of my core beliefs. Downturns don't eliminate opportunity. They redistribute it. Now, think about that for a minute. Downturns don't eliminate opportunity. They redistribute it. The opportunities don't disappear. They simply change hands. The contractors who panic begin giving opportunities away. And the contractors who stay disciplined begin collecting them. Okay, I watched it happen again and again and again. I'm going to give you an example of a friend of mine. He's a local renovation contractor in my area. Okay, and we have talked about this many times because we're at a period right now where renovation contractors in this part of the country are struggling as a whole. Not him. Okay, Kevin is swamped. He's hiring more guys. He's booked way out. Now, he has the fundamentals down. He's an extremely capable and competent contractor. He offers tremendous customer service, great communication, and all those things. But I was having breakfast with him a number of months ago now and asked him, why do you think it is that you stayed busy and other contractors have struggled? And he said, because during COVID, he never let any calls slip. What was happening during COVID was people could cherry pick the best, right? They couldn't handle everything. So they would just cherry pick the best, but not him. Not him. He said, I wouldn't do that in a bad economy. I'm not going to do it in a good economy, right? And he has continued that, and it has built his reputation to a point now where that opportunity that used to be with other contractors has now moved to him, okay? And his referral base is huge at this point, right? So he does continue to market. He does continue to close sales. He's very, very good at it. He has good staff. He runs a good, disciplined business, okay? But this is what's happened again. The opportunities changed hands during a very difficult period for contractors, okay? When business is booming, almost everybody looks successful. The phone rings, people are buying, even average contractors stay busy. It's actually pretty hard to tell who's running a great business and who's simply riding a great economy. But when the market tightens, everything changes. And I always use this expression, and I'm sorry for the graphic nature of it, but the tide goes out, and now we know who's swimming naked, okay? When the tide was in, everybody looked the same, but now it's out. Now, everything changes. Customers become more selective. They ask more questions. They compare more contractors. They read more reviews. They expect better communication. They want confidence before they spend their money. In other words, the market starts rewarding true professionalism. And that's where the opportunity begins, because while customers become more selective, many contractors become less disciplined. They start cutting corners. They stop returning phone calls promptly. They stop following up on estimates. They quit asking for reviews. They stop posting on social media because they don't think it matters anymore. They stop investing in marketing because they're trying to save money. They stop networking because they're too busy to trying to survive. They stop learning. They stop improving. They stop believing they can actually grow. And every time one contractor quits doing those things, someone else has an opportunity to step into that space. Think about something as simple as follow-up. A homeowner gets 3 estimates, one contractor drops off the quote and disappears. Another sends one quick text. The third follows up professionally, answers questions, provides reference, explains the process, and stays in touch. Now, who do you think is going to win? Notice it had nothing to do with price. It's not always the cheapest. Usually the one who inspires the most confidence, the most trust, and that confidence and trust has tremendous value. Professionalism has value. Those things become even more valuable when money gets tight. That's why I actually believe difficult markets reward excellent businesses. Here's another way to think about it. Let's imagine your city normally has 1,000 jobs available in a year. Okay. Now imagine that number drops to 800. Most contractors immediately focus on the fact there's 200 fewer jobs. That's all they see. But I look at it differently. What if during that same period, 20% of your competitors stop marketing? What if some retire? What if others become inconsistent? Or some that were going to start up decide, oh no, it's too tough, I'm not going to, so you have fewer startups. What if some damage their reputation by cutting corners? What if many simply stop trying? Well, the economy's bad. I mean, what's the point in trying? Suddenly you're not competing against the same field anymore. There may be fewer jobs, but there are also fewer contractors doing an exceptional job. That means your share of the market can actually increase. And that's a concept most contractors never think about. Don't just chase a bigger market. Become a bigger player in the market you already have. I've experienced this personally, okay? Some of the biggest breakthroughs in my career didn't happen when everything was easy. They happened when everyone else pulled back. When competitors stopped marketing, I kept doing it. When others stopped building relationships, I kept visiting customers. When others became negative, I stayed optimistic, okay? I'm going to borrow from the late Zig Ziglar, my favorite sales trainer of all time. He said that the news media has correctly predicted, I think he said they predicted 37 of the last, they predicted 13 of the last 3 recessions, right? I mean, stop being so negative. Be optimistic, okay? When others were focusing on what they couldn't control, I focused on what I could. And over time, that compounds. You don't notice it in a week. You might not even notice it in a month. But 6 months later, 12 months later, 2 years later, you're no longer competing with the contractor you used to worry about. You've outgrown them. Not because you were smarter, not because you got lucky, because you stayed consistent when they were inconsistent. You stayed optimistic when they became pessimistic, okay? I love the business owner that said there was a recession ongoing, and he said, happily, I've decided not to participate in this recession. Don't participate, okay? You don't have to. Nobody's got a gun to your head. I often think about 2 contractors working in the same town, okay? They're both facing the same economy, the same interest rates, same material costs. I mean, they buy from the same suppliers. They got the same customer pool. One spends every coffee break talking about how bad things are. The other spends the same hour working on his website, asking for reviews, doing some training, following up on old estimates, learning how to sell better, strengthening relationships with his referral partners. Fast forward a year. Which business do you think is in a stronger position? See, it isn't the economy that creates that difference. It was the daily choices. Business has always rewarded consistency, not perfection, consistency. So here's my challenge to you. Don't spend your energy asking how bad is the market. Start asking this. What opportunities are other contractors missing because they're too busy worrying about the market? Because I promise you, those opportunities are there. They've always been there. They always will be. The contractors who win in difficult times aren't the ones with the biggest advertising budget or the newest truck or the lowest prices. They're the ones who continue doing the ordinary things extraordinarily well while everyone else is looking for someone else to blame. And that's how market leaders are built. It's not during easy times. It's during difficult ones when everyone else loses their sense of discipline. Now, I want to talk about 5 things every contractor should do right now. I want to make this practical. If you're listening to this while you're driving to a job site, sitting in your truck, I want to give you 5 things you can start doing immediately. I'm all about action on this show. In fact, I'll put a plug in here for everything I do. Contractor Authority Training. If you go on school.com, SKOOL.com, I offer sales training, lead generation training, management training, a whole bunch of things in Contractor Authority. I think we're up to 13 or 14 training modules right now, and that grows every month, okay? It's a monthly fee right now. Now, if you're listening to this when this is being broadcast, it's $49 a month, okay? But it continues to grow, and that price stays yours no matter what is added. Whatever you lock in at is what you stay at. So go look that up, by the way. Contractor Authority on school.com. Again, it's SKOOL.com. So I'll put that little plug in there, and follow me on social media as well, John the Contractor Growth Guy, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. Okay, because in all of those venues, one of the things I find very important is I have to make sure that everything I give you is actionable, real solutions. Okay, none of these things I'm going to give you now require a better economy. They don't require lower material costs. None of these depend on what your competitors are doing. These are the things that are completely within your control. Number one, know your numbers. Okay, and I mean really know them. Not guess, not estimate, know them. How much does it cost to run your business every month? What's your overhead? What's your gross profit margin? What's your net profit margin? What's your closing ratio in sales? Okay. Know how many leads you're bringing in a month. How much revenue do you need just to break even before you make a single dollar of profit? How much does it cost you to send one truck out every day? Most contractors know how to build. Far fewer know how to read their own business. And that's dangerous, because when times get tougher, small mistakes become even bigger. Okay? They become very expensive. If your margins are shrinking and you don't know they're shrinking, you're in trouble. By the time you realize it, it's too late. Okay? One of my favorite sayings is this: what gets measured gets managed. You cannot improve numbers that you don't know. You can't improve your closing ratio in sales if you don't even know what it is. If you don't know your numbers, you can't make good decisions. By the way, I have a coaching session dedicated to this. I believe this is one of the most important things that contractors need to focus on, is knowing their numbers. Number two, protect your margins. Okay. Second thing is this, and this follows, you have to know your numbers to be able to do this. Protect your margins. I know the temptation. You lose a couple of jobs, the phone gets a little bit quieter, someone tells you they received another estimate. Suddenly you start thinking, I got to sharpen my pencil. Okay, but be careful, because competing on price is one of the easiest ways to build a busy business that's unprofitable. I've seen contractors with $1 million in annual revenue who are struggling to pay their bills. I've also seen smaller contractors making excellent money because they understood their costs, they understood their pricing. Remember, revenue is vanity, profit is reality. Customers don't automatically buy the cheapest contractor. I cannot repeat this enough. They buy the contractor they trust. So explain your process, explain your warranty, explain your communication, explain your experience, show them why you're worth more, and don't ever apologize for making a profit. Profit isn't greed. It allows you to hire better people, to buy better equipment, to stand behind your warranty, and still be in business 5 years from now. Because here's the truth: a busy contractor can still go broke. Number three, here's something that cost you, this one cost you almost nothing, okay? But it separates average contractors from exceptional ones. Communication. Customers don't just want someone who can build or who can do the job. They want someone they can trust. Keep them informed, return their phone calls, answer their questions, explain what's happening. If costs have changed, tell them early. Don't surprise people. Educate them. Most customers understand that prices change. What they don't like is finding out the last minute. Okay? Confidence builds trust, and trust builds sales, and great communication is one of the easiest ways to stand out in a competitive market. Okay? Number four, this one might save you more money than anything else I say today. Okay? Before you lower your prices, look for waste. Think about where money quietly disappears every single week. Okay? Callbacks on jobs, rework, employees standing around waiting, multiple trips because someone forgot materials. Okay? That's a lack of organization, poor scheduling, driving around town unnecessarily, ordering the wrong products, equipment sitting broken because maintenance was ignored. Those things cost real money. The amazing thing is this: most contractors spend far more time trying to squeeze another $200 out of a customer than they do trying to eliminate $200 of waste inside their business. The cheapest way to improve profit is to stop losing money. Sometimes the biggest raise you'll ever give yourself isn't charging more, it's becoming more efficient. Okay? Now, number five. This may be the most important point of the entire episode. And I've already alluded to this because when business slows down, most contractors retreat. They pull into a defensive position. They stop marketing, they stop learning, they stop training, they stop creating content, they stop asking for referrals even, which I don't understand. They stop networking, they stop meeting with referral partners, they stop investing in themselves because they're trying to save money. And I want to challenge you to think differently. When everyone else pulls back, lean in, keep learning. Read books, listen to podcasts, take training, invest money in it even. Improve your sales process, strengthen your website, create helpful content, ask every satisfied customer for a review, build more relationships with builders and architects, designers, realtors, property managers, people who can consistently send work your way. Plant seeds today that will grow tomorrow. One of the greatest advantages you can have in business is consistency, because consistency compounds. You don't have to become the best contractor overnight. You just have to become a little better every single week. And while your competitors are standing still, you'll quietly be pulling ahead. That's why I'll leave you with this thought, okay? The best time to improve your business is while competitors are standing still. When the market eventually turns, and it always does, you will not be scrambling to catch up. You'll already be ahead. I think this is where you become reflective, okay? I want you to reflect on that, okay? It's very, very important that you do that. Now, I want to just move into the next segment here as we wrap up. I want to leave you with a different perspective, okay? I've been involved in business, as I've said a few times in this episode, more than 30 years. And there's one thing I've learned. It's that every generation of business owners believes they're facing challenges no one else has ever faced, okay? But when you step back and you look at history, you realize that just isn't true, okay? Think about all that we've lived through. I mean, I was 6 years old in 1981 when interest rates were 22%, okay? That was hard on business. That was hard on realtors. That was hard on contractors. That was hard on anybody to do with anything to do with housing, okay? Housing markets cooled down, which we're seeing right now. There was the financial crisis of 2008. COVID shut down businesses overnight. Supply chain disruptions made it feel difficult to get everything from lumber to windows to electrical components. Inflation drove up the cost of nearly everything. Interest rates have climbed. Labor shortages have made it harder to find good people. Now we're dealing with another season of economic uncertainty. Every one of those events caused people to ask the same question. Is this the new normal? Will business ever get better? How are we supposed to survive this? And yet, here we are. Okay, business continued. The economy recovered. New companies were built. Existing companies grew. And some of the strongest businesses you see today were actually forged during those difficult years. Okay, why? Well, it certainly wasn't because conditions were perfect. They weren't. It wasn't because those owners got lucky, because many of them didn't. They succeeded because they adapted, they adjusted, they learned, they improved, they kept moving forward while everyone else was waiting for the economy's permission to grow. I've said that business is a lot like sailing, okay? You can't control the wind. And you can't, I mean, you don't get to choose whether the economy is strong or weak. You don't get to decide what fuel costs. That's just beyond you, okay? You don't decide what materials cost. You don't decide what interest rates are going to be next month. But you do get to adjust your sails, okay? And I mean sales in the sense of S-A-I-L-S, and maybe the other spelling too. You get to decide how you'll respond. You get to decide whether you'll keep learning and growing and training, whether you'll continue building relationships, whether you'll communicate better than your competitors, whether you'll become more efficient, whether you'll lead your team with confidence instead of fear. That's all your choice. I've noticed something interesting over the years too. When I talk to contractors who have built exceptional businesses, very few of them spend much time talking about the economy. They talk about their customers, their people, their systems, their marketing, their goals, their next opportunity. They aren't ignoring reality, but they're not focusing on something they can't influence, they can't change. They're simply focused on things they can influence, they can change, and that's a powerful mindset because your business rarely rises above the level of your thinking. If all you see is obstacles, eventually you stop looking for opportunities. But if you train yourself to ask, where is the opportunity in this? What's the silver lining of this cloud? Okay, you'll start noticing things that other contractors completely miss. So whatever the next few months bring, don't wait for perfect conditions. They've never existed yet. They're not about to. There's never been a perfect time to start a business or to grow one. Every successful contractor you admire built their business while dealing with problems, uncertainty, competition, setbacks. That's not the exception, that's the rule. The question has never been, will the market become perfect? The real question is, will I become the kind of business owner who can thrive in any market? Because when you do, you'll stop fearing difficult times. You'll start seeing them for what they really are. Okay? An opportunity to become stronger than you were before. Okay? So, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with one final thought. You cannot control all the things we've talked about: materials, costs, interest rates, what your competitors are going to do, the economy as a whole. If you spend your whole time worrying about those things, you'll never have enough energy left to improve the things you actually can control. But here's what you can control. You can control your attitude. You can control your pricing. You can control your customer service. You get to decide how quickly you return phone calls and emails. You get to decide how well you communicate with customers. You get to decide how you market. You control your follow-up and how disciplined you are. Perhaps more importantly, how much you learn, okay? Because the contractors who continue learning continue growing. I have to put a plug in here. One of the reasons why I offer training, not just because it's a profit center, I have to get paid for what I do, obviously, okay? But I firmly believe that training is one of the most important and overlooked things. Listen, let me talk to you skilled tradespeople out there. My son-in-law is training to be an electrician. It seems like it's taking forever. Do you know why? Because in this jurisdiction, we want our electricians to be well-trained, to be safe operators, to be professional, to know things, and it takes years of on-the-job training and in-classroom training to learn those skills, okay? And yet, if he does what I think he'll do in the years that are coming and opens his own electrical contracting company, how much training has he had on the business side of it? How to do sales, how to do marketing, how to turn leads into sales, how to figure out his numbers, right? All those things that are absolutely vital, nobody teaches. So that's a whole, again, going back to the beginning, I've seen a problem, and that's the problem I'm trying to solve. So that's why I have built and am continuing to build the Contractor Authority training course. And I think at the price it's being offered at, it is tremendous value. It's not going to stay that price what it is forever. Okay, so if you're not doing Contractor Authority training, you are leaving some of the best money you've ever had on the table. I know I'm biased. I don't care. I think by now you've listened to me long enough that you trust me, and so I'm going to say this. Go check it out, Contractor Authority on school.com, SKOOL.com, okay? So, in conclusion, look, it's the contractors who continue learning that continue growing, okay? The ones who think they already know everything usually stop growing. So, here's my challenge to you. Don't spend the next 6 months talking about how hard business is. Spend the next 6 months becoming the contractor everyone else is trying to catch, because I want you to become the contractor who answers the phone, who follows up, communicates well, knows their numbers, okay, knows their margins and protects them, keeps learning, builds relationships, earns trust. Because when the market improves, and it always does, you won't be trying to recover. You'll already be leading. So if today's episode challenged you or encouraged you, and I know it's been a long one, but I'm passionate. I think you know, you've been able to sense that today. I'm very passionate about this. I'd love to stay connected with you. Okay, you can find me on social media by searching for the Contractor Growth Guy. Okay, every week I share practical tips, sales advice, business strategies, and lessons I've learned. If you're serious about growing your business, please do check out Contractor Authority. If you're looking for personalized guidance, I do work one-on-one with contractors all over the world through my coaching program. Sometimes the fastest way to solve a problem is to have someone who's already been there walk through it with you. Okay, whether it's improving your sales process, building better systems, increasing your profits, growing your online presence, or simply having someone to keep you accountable, to challenge you. I'd be honored to help you. You can find links to everything on my social media. Okay, if you found today's episode valuable, here's one favor I would ask for you. Share it with another contractor. Okay, we want to grow this community. Because if it helps other contractors discover the podcast, together we can help raise the standard of our industry as a whole. So until next time, guys, keep building, keep learning, keep improving, and remember, hard markets don't build great contractors, they reveal them, and they sometimes also help build them. So when times are easy, everyone looks successful, but when times are tough, that's when discipline, character, and smart business practices separate the professionals from everyone else. So be the contractor who grows while others wait. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.